This is episode 11 of Hoops Forum, a joint effort of Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. Before we get going, I want to thank our sponsors over at 323 Sports. Uniforms, team gear, spirit wear, sports equipment, 323 Sports. They really can do it all for your sports program. To find out more about 323 Sports, you can head over to their website or you can send them an email, sales@323sports.com. That'll get you in touch with a team rep. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports program. For those watching live, we'd love to hear from you. I'd love for you to be a part of our conversation. If you'd like to share your thoughts, or if you'd like to just maybe ask a question or something as we talk here, all you need to do is reply to this post here on Twitter, and we'll be sure to feature those comments and questions into the broadcast. The big news yesterday was no April Fool's joke. I know some of us thought maybe it was, but Roy Williams retiring as the head coach at UNC. And then also about 30 minutes later is all announced that Chris Beard will be leaving Texas Tech for the University of Texas. The last one there, Randy, especially as a Texan yourself.
Yeah.
Any thoughts with that?
Oh, I was not overly surprised, maybe a little surprised, but I thought as there was no news after Shaka Smart left for Marquette, and there was no news for a few days, I thought that it was beginning to look possible that Chris Beard was going to go to Texas because his buyout dropped on April 1st, and they were just kind of waiting for that day for that. So when it got to that date, I was like, okay, I think this might happen. I think him being a graduate, an alumni of University of Texas, probably played a major role, and Texas is a brand name that in college athletics that hard to resist. So I'm not overly surprised.
It kind of brings up the topic of like a better situation. And I know most would say, yeah, better situation means more money. And a lot of times that is how it works in college athletics. But like the kind of bigger question is like, what makes a better job? Obviously, this part of year, it's not just college, but you're nearing the end of a school year and people potentially going even from high school to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a topic too that I know you work with your people that you work with, Radius Athletics, and maybe some things that we can talk about later of preparing them for that job. But what would you say constitutes making a better job?
Well, I think there's a lot of inputs into that, and some of them just don't have solely just to do with basketball. So, there's family reasons. You want to live in a certain geographic area or not, or things like that. But I think if we're just going to talk generally speaking, to me, what would make a job a better job? Just my metric or what I use to define it is what is the ceiling of their competitive level? Is this not every job is a championship level job, not every Division I job is a Final Four job or something like that, what is the ceiling that can be achieved here versus other places? So I think a big input too would be the commitment that the institution, whether that is a high school, a university, at whatever level, the commitment that they have toward athletics and toward basketball in specific from an administrative standpoint. Will the coach have the tools and the opportunities he needs or she needs to compete in the modern marketplace for players, for exposure and things like that? All that goes into it. That I think though, really that's for each coach to define what makes a job a better job, because it may not just be all about the basketball all the time.
Yeah, I think the topic even is something that we probably coaches should, even if they're thinking about clicking off of this, as much as we would like to think that we're staying at the same place forever, like the reality of that even happening versus compared to like 15 or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the numbers, but has probably significantly decreased. And so like what makes the better job, you better start thinking about through this. I think in the past, a lot of times it was almost like a new coach came in because the previous team wasn't any good. But you even now at the highest level, professional levels, and I was just talking to a college coach the other day, or a high school coach about this the other day, she went in and inherited a team that was already pretty good. I mean, they were like 18-6, and
Hmm.
a major player. If I were to mention them, everybody would know them nationally at the high school level, and then
Hmm.
took them to that next level. And that kind of goes to your point of like what is there for maybe for me to work with, and then also on top of that, even like we talk about this for college kids all the time, and it's a big topic right now for the transfers. But like, what's a good fit for you?
Yeah.
Because I still think that too many people think basketball is basketball no matter where you go, and it's
Hmm.
not. And even at the college level, there are some schools that if you were to name, you would now think more about, oh man, I don't know if there's even a chance for me to be able to win at that school because of the academic standards, because of how much it costs, because of whatever it is. So
Right.
yeah, I think something that probably in the past maybe some wouldn't think about, because those schools even kept those coaches. They kept them longer, and
Hmm.
now the leashes are shorter and shorter and shorter, even at the
Yeah.
high school level.
Yeah.
So, and then it kind of begs the next question, like, do you think coaches can stay too long sometimes?
I do. I think that uh, a coach, your your voice starts to sort of get ignored, and what you're talking about starts to fall flat, and we kind of do the same thing year after year after year, and you know it's not bad for a new voice and a new fresh start. Sometimes you see it work out for when a coach leaves who maybe the narrative is that they have been there too long. It works out for both parties. The coach goes somewhere else, and it's almost like, oh yeah, I feel like a rookie coach again, and they're reinvigorated, and then the program they left behind gets someone in place, and they are re-energized by a new leader. So I do think a coach can stay too long. I know, like, with Roy Williams, if you watch that press conference yesterday, I thought he was amazingly self-aware and honest about his own faculties and his own capability to continue doing the job. I that really touched me, that someone was that self-aware and really cared about the program enough, because you do see some coaches like clinging to the job like till their grave nearly, and I do I res- after watching that press conference yesterday and hearing Coach Williams talk about, he just didn't have the energy to bring to the job. He was forgetting things. He was very, very honest, brutally honest about why he was leaving the job. He just felt like he wasn't up for it anymore. And I think if I were a North Carolina fan, which I'm not, nor am I a North Carolina hater, I'm not a Duke fan or anything like that. I'm just an outside observer. I would be nostalgic. I would be very, appreciative, very nostalgic. But I would also be grateful that, like, this wasn't one of those places where someone just clung on to the job until they were really unable to perform it, and no one wanted to say, "Hey, you got to go, man!" Like because it. I would feel good that didn't happen, while very appreciative and nostalgic about losing Coach Williams. So yeah, staying too long can happen.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is just like you said, being self-aware and understanding not just yourself, but also the situation, and then maybe even the direction the school is going, or the types of players that now need to be recruited for the team to be successful.
Hmm.
It doesn't show, I don't think it shows a sign of weakness to admit that something along those lines doesn't match up.
Yeah.
And like you said, sometimes it can just be a change of scenery for somebody, or just a quick change of personnel.
And
Um,
to me, what I saw yesterday from Roy Williams was just a love so strong for that school and that program, that he didn't want to, cling on so long that his being there would drag it down.
yeah, yeah. And that begs, obviously now you have an opportunity for somebody else to step in there. And there's a couple other places, Texas, of course, and there have been some others that have already been filled. But taking kind of like that pressure job versus going
Right.
somewhere with lower expectations and building it up. Um, Immediately, I'm thinking of some guys just may not be cut out for that, even though they'd like to think that they are.
Hmm.
But also then kind of weighing the two of those, what would you personally consider as you're looking at, if you had the opportunity to pick one of those? versus a lower expectation job?
Well, I mean, I think before I'd answer that, I would say if it's a job with low expectations like that maybe has some appeal. That I would be very diligent when I interviewed them. Not only are they, when you go for a job, you're not only interviewing, they're not only interviewing you, but you're checking them. Do I want to work here? When I was interviewing them, if it was a job with low expectations, maybe no tradition of is there a commitment to change that, or are they just, well, we got to have a basketball team here. You're a coach, and you're going to be hamstrung at every turn when you're trying to turn this thing around. Then I wouldn't be interested in that job. But if there's a job with low expectations, that hey, we want to win here. We're through with losing. We want to win here. I think that can be a really good situation for a coach. But you asked me personally, what say would be more of my preference is I want to coach somewhere where basketball or whatever sport, if a football coach is watching, or if a lacrosse or soccer coach is watching, I want to coach somewhere where that sport is very important to that university or that high school or that community. That's just my personal preference. I don't want to really, like, I know how hard, I've seen how hard. I work with a lot of coaches who are coaching in situations where there's really no tradition. Maybe there's not even very many winning programs in the school, be they football, girls volleyball, or whatever. Like, their school just doesn't do a whole lot of winning in anything, and they're trying to build that from nothing, and that's just very, very difficult. So personally, I want to go somewhere with a good athletic program where there's winning going on. There's parents who want their kids to play hard if it's a high school and be coached. If it's a college, it's a place where players want to go play. When the emblem on your chest at the AAU tournament on the golf shirt, like, they go, oh, that's the coach from. That's what I want. That's me personally. That's what I would want.
Yeah. From somebody experienced who has, I didn't go into a new situation as in like the school already existed. We started intercollegiate sports. So you were absolutely nothing, no brand recognition or anything like that.
Right.
And for so many coaches who are like trying to use this next job as the stepping stone, if you're just trying to use that as a stepping stone and that's where you're going in and what you just described, where you're trying to build tradition, like, don't expect that to be something that happens very quickly. I don't care how great of a coach or recruiter or whatever you think you are. It takes time. It takes time to build something like that. And that kind of begs the next question, because as some are watching as head coaches, but then also a lot of people I know watch this as assistant coaches.
Sure.
And the question of always when is the right time for me to make the jump, and what factors, and they may be factors that you've already mentioned, but have you talked with, I know most of your mentees are head coaches, but and you may want to address too some of the questions that maybe they get asked, that we can kind of merge into that a little bit too, the interview process. But even talking about making that jump.
Yeah, making that jump. I think what I see is, I do work with guys who are assistant coaches or who used to be, while when they first joined my program, they're assistant coaches. Now they're head coaches. So I've worked with all across the spectrum. When to make that jump is a tough question to answer. Like, what are you willing to do to make that jump? Are you willing to get in that U-Haul? That's a big factor. Sometimes, like, I want to be a head coach, but I'm not going to move from, Dallas to Houston, or from Houston to South Carolina or something. Like, this is where my family is. So you're really kind of limiting the options. You need a job to come available. Two, it's if you're not willing to get in that U-Haul, it needs to be, right around you. So the opportunities may be fewer and far between. So what are you willing to do to make that jump? Where are you willing to go coach a junior college in Montana or something, like to just to get an opportunity? I think my advice always to assistant coaches who want to become head coaches is, while you're an assistant, do everything within your power to help that head coach who you're working for win games. That's the best thing you can do for your brand, right? Like, Like you can tweet, start a blog, make a YouTube, all that, but like nothing will ring in the ears better of the athletic director that's going to hire you. Like, oh, that guy came from that program, you know. So you know, I work with some high school coaches who maybe they're a junior varsity coach or a JV coach, or like, you know, we're looking at their resume and they're like, should I tell them my JV record? I go like, well, if you can, if you want, but if the varsity wins, we all win, right? Like the JV coach at DeMatha, right? Like when he applies for a high school job, like that gets him in the door, even if his JV wasn't very good, right? Like so the best thing you can do is help that person you're working for get results, because when you know, that will bolster your career better than anything. I say win, and win in the postseason. There's nothing better for your career to be aligned with a program that wins, preferably in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're wondering what I get asked this all the time, I'm an assistant coach, what should I be doing to help, you know, myself get a head coaching position, win something, whatever, you know, help this guy coach defense better, help this woman you're working for, if she's coaching, you know, get in there and help that person succeed, because that's what will help your career better than anything.
Mm-hmm. I think from the other side too, like what you're on a day-to-day basis, what you're doing to develop as many skills as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you're doing is practice planning. That's great, but at the college level, there are so many other things involved. Like I've spent
Sure.
in the last 48 hours, I've spent quite a bit of those once tomorrow comes, there'll be about 72 hours, and I will have spent considerable hours every single day, either walking recruits around campus or bringing in kids through a camp and spending time with them. And I think recruiting, sometimes we even think of like, well, I go out on the road and I recruit. Or there's so many other things that go into it as well. And it goes outside of recruiting, like what you just mentioned about being able to promote the program, or being able to scheduling, being able
Mm-hmm.
whatever you can do to sometimes take things off of your head coach's plate. But in addition to that, developing the skills so that when you get out there, I still talk to some coaches sometimes, that even ones that are successful at the high school level, and they're wanting to make the jump to the college, and they're like, well, I'm waiting for the best situation. And I get this sense like they're going to walk in there and it's going to be roses, and we're going to carry on the success, and it's going to be ready
Yeah.
to go right away. And I'm just thinking like, man, there's a lot more that goes into it than things that you're probably aware of, or that you think that you're going to be thinking about.
Yeah. And, you know, making that move from assistant to head, another piece of advice I always give is be ready so you don't have to get ready. So I was talking to someone just this week who you know, was in this exact situation we're talking about of when your time does come, you know, use the time while you're an assistant to do all the things to support the program you're a part of. Like you said, that could be film, that could be recruiting, it could be you know, graphics and social media, or whatever your role is within that organization. You know, perform that to your best of abilities, but all the while you're making mental notes of like, when I want to apply for a head coaching position, or if I'm approached about one, that happens sometimes. Like, would you be interested in applying? You know, and like, oh wait, now I've got to have an interview process down, and I've got to have a resume, and I've got to have a plan to lead a program. Like I always said, be ready so you don't have to get ready. So think about those things, and during the, you know, slower times, whenever those may be, like write out your coaching philosophy, your experience, have that, update your resume every year at the end of the year, and think about if your phone rang tomorrow with an opportunity, are you actually ready? Are you actually ready? Do you know what, even down to the X's and O's level, do you know what you want to teach? What are you best at teaching? What are you know, what's your philosophy going into that job? Think about those things. So when an opportunity that does maybe even fall in your lap or come open, and you can jump right on it and get in there. And that's part of what I do with assistant coaches in my program, is say, hey, yeah, assistants are welcome, because it'll help you get ready. So when that opportunity comes, you'll be ready.
Are there any other questions in addition to the ones you just mentioned, that coaches struggle with as you kind of do those mock interviews?
Yeah. So one thing I started doing a few years ago with the coaches I work with in my mentoring program is, around this time of year, it's late spring, summer, in the next month or two, inevitably a coach will send me a message or an email saying, "Hey, I got a job interview." And one thing I do in maybe a one-on-one sessions is I literally role play with them. And I spent some time as an assistant athletic director and a basketball coach. So I was in on some interview processes and led a few and was, obviously on the other side of the table to get to land jobs. And I've kind of made a interview sheet of questions that I sit down and we get on a session much like you and I are on right now and do a mock interview where I don't like this word, but pretend that I'm the athletic director or whomever and they're them and we just like role play and I go through the question, take notes on their responses. I would say there's a couple that stand out about that I say after I've done several of these that I don't see that I can tell the coach is a little bit unprepared for the question. And a lot of that has to do that the main one that stands out, like if let's make a hypothetical that it's a high school coaching position or even a college one, it doesn't matter. Tell me how you would use your staff. Like what are you going to delegate? What are you gonna do with your sub-varsity coaches if it's a high school, if it's like tell me your ideal arrangement for your staff and how you would use those human resources that you're given to support you. What does that look like? And I can tell that like coaches sometimes haven't thought about, well, I want my first assistant to be in charge of this. And my if I'm a high school coach, my junior varsity coach, in addition to coaching the junior varsity team, also perform. They've not thought about that. Even some guys that are already head coaches that are wanting to move from school to school just don't always sound so great in that answer. That's a warning flag to me. That's a red flag to me. That tells me this is a micromanager. That tells me this is a person who's trying to do it all, who's going to get overwhelmed, who's going to get overworked, and then things are going to fall through the cracks because they're not using their human resources. So that would be a red flag to me as the interviewer. Like if you don't really have a great question there, that tells me you've not done that. So you've not thought that through. You've not enacted a plan along these lines. So I'm a little concerned that you might be, I got to do everything because no one here is capable but me, and that's a problem.
I would say for the college level, I think being able to again think about the things that aren't basketball related.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just sat through a meeting this last week that went for about 2 hours that had to do with like recruiting people towards your school. What are you going to do? Because a lot of the schools outside of that D1 level, a huge part of their philosophy is you're recruiting student athletes, not for us just to win, but also for us to bring students onto campus.
Mm-hmm.
And how well are you aligned with, or are you going to be okay with, like, you're basically an extension of the admissions office too.
Yeah.
And I think this goes to the point of like being ready for the non-basketball things.
Yes.
And so, whatever kind of question it has to do with, whether it's admissions or, student life or fundraising, even, all of those are important because at some point at the college level, you will be faced with having to do something that's not basketball that you were like, man,
Sure.
I don't know if I signed up for this.
Yeah. And one thing also, and I'd say another question that I ask in these interview process that coaches are timid about answering is I ask a question that asks basically, we're making some assumptions that maybe like a coach is coaching at, this high school and like somewhere in the area he wants to go or she wants to go to another school that they're at least somewhat familiar with, right? They've maybe coached against them, seen them in tournaments or played against them or something like that. And I always ask the question as playing the role as the interviewer, the athletic director or whomever, ask the candidate, what do we need? What is needed at this program to get to where we want to go? Like if we're bad, what's needed for us to get good? If we're good, what's needed for us to get great? And I've found that coaches in that question are sometimes timid about telling the leader of the school, like, this is what needs to be done here. I play against your team and they seem out of shape or something like. So one thing I think would help this school right away, whether you hire me or not, is, you know, a better attention to strength and conditioning or something, you know, like whatever that answer is. Coaches, you know, if a job is open and the athletic director or whomever that's doing the hiring, they have a problem. They have a problem. The job is open and they want it filled. Two, they want that job to go from whatever level to the next level, whether that's from, you know, 28-5 and losing in the state semis to winning it all, or 0-20 to average. They want that to go a level above. So you are a solution to that problem, or potentially a solution to that problem. So what I want to know is one, have you done homework on the job? Are you on the position, or you just want a job? So do you know where we are competitively? Do you know what, you know, what we need? Two, if that athletic director who's sitting there evaluating the coach that he's now replacing or she's now replacing, they probably have an idea of like, man, our basketball program really needs blank. So if they assess it and you assess it from an outsider perspective, and that assessment matches, you probably just landed the job. Like, yes, he sees what I see is the problem, and he's now presented a solution. I'm hiring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are more things, again, outside of the basketball that I think that probably a lot of coaches that haven't gone through that before just aren't prepared for. And if you're not prepared for something like that, but you want to be, because this year or coming up in the future, I would definitely reach out to Randy. He's had the opportunity to go through that himself. And then in addition to that, has worked with a lot of coaches and be able to help with them with that. So sure to reach out to him. And transition here to something connected to our poll was this week connected to the Final Four. Obviously tomorrow we have games, and then Monday's the national championship game. So it's time for our segments Beyond the Scoreboard, presented by Sideline Interactive. And you may be in the market for a new scoreboard or a new scorer's table. Super excited. We're looking into a new scorer's table, so hopefully going to be getting that before the next basketball season here. But Sideline Interactive can help you out with that. The leading manufacturer in scoring tables and video display boards for high schools and coaches, or high schools and colleges around the country. To find out more about Sideline Interactive, visit sidelineinteractive.com. So the question this week, Randy, on Twitter, on our accounts, who do you have winning the national championship? And this is always, I ask a similar question to this to somebody who was like data analytical mind. And I asked them, you know, is it going to be, this is a different question, but it was similar to this one, like Gonzaga or the field? And they started breaking down for me the statistics of all the how the field and betting and whatnot. Obviously, our poll was not very voted on by people who think that direction, because 82.9% of them picked Gonzaga. Do you feel the same way?
I do. Yeah. I think they just look overpowering. They look like they look somewhere between a college team and a pro team. I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, Gonzaga could beat the last place team in the NBA. No, but like they look somewhere between that. You know, they're better than they. That's not to say they couldn't have a bad night and lose, but I'm leaning heavily in that direction.
Well, let me just ask you then. They could have a bad night and lose. What would they need to do for that to happen?
Wow. You know, just you know, I'm thinking, I'm visualizing them playing and thinking like, okay, they've got a good inside game, a good outside game with Kispert and Suggs, and an inside game with Timmy. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know really. Like, I think someone would have to throw a real curveball at them strategically to get them thinking and slowing down and sort of playing off balance. But I don't know, man. Like, I just, you know, maybe if there was some foul trouble but even that, they've got depth. You know, they bring in some guys off the bench who look good, and I think if there was some, you know, foul trouble, I really think Baylor is the only team that could really kind of stand in front of them and look like they belong. You know, I say that now watching use the UCLA or something, but you know, I mean, maybe some foul trouble could knock them off their game a little bit, where they had to play long stretch of the game shorthanded. But I really don't know from a strategic point if there's anything that could catch them off guard or cause them to be flat-footed.
You have even younger players who are playing like veteran players, like Jalen Suggs. It's not just his skill, but it's also, and it helps being put in with veteran guys. I know it almost, when that happens on teams that I've coached, it almost raises the level of the younger guys
Mm-hmm.
when you have just a bunch of younger guys. And where you really see that is something you and I harp on a ton and has been the theme almost of this show. But I think last against Oregon revealed how great their spacing is.
Yeah.
Like they understand space, and you saw Oregon State attempt to like zone them, and that didn't go very well at all. Like
Yeah.
we'll slow them down and play some zone and get the tempo down, and they just like picked it apart.
Yeah.
And then so the ball movement that you end up with, the all the things that we talked about on the zone offense episode a couple weeks ago. And then in addition to that, like you said, like so much depth at different positions. I can't remember what their assists, but they're like one of the top in assists per game.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it shows more than just they share the basketball, but like they have multiple dudes that can score.
Yeah, they're the type of team that a player like Timmy, who's been very good in the tournament, could have a bad game, and it really won't matter that much. But I don't know that any of the other teams could say that about some of their players. Could they withstand a bad game? The thing that I noticed when watching Gonzaga is just they just constantly are putting pressure. They play what I call pressure offense, right? Instead of pressure defense, they play pressure offense. They're coming downhill at you in transition. They're either getting it inside to a big where they're threatening the rim with that, or they're driving it there, or they're it just feels like the court slanted to their, toward their goal, and they're just constantly putting pressure on their opponents, and that never stops, and they never take off the gas. Not necessarily about playing fast, but just how they just constantly are on the attack. And I think Baylor's probably the only team. I like Baylor's team. Their backcourt, they've got three really nice guards who can cause some problems on the defensive end. I like to say they've got three 3-and-D guys who can shoot the three, and they're equally as good defenders, which is rare and awesome. Like that's the two priority skills in basketball, is being able to score and being able to guard the ball, and that's their whole backcourt. So I think that's an awesome recipe. I just don't know that it'll be enough to derail Gonzaga. The other two teams, Houston, I just don't know that their offense is quite prolific enough to get past Baylor, or of course their best shot is their rebound putback. But I just don't know that that's going to hold up. But they do play great defense, and that'll be a battle. That'll be a Baylor will have to earn that win. What do you think, UCLA? What do you see from them being? What can they look at and go, okay, well, we got a chance if we do this. Like I don't know. What do you think?
Primarily their defense. I heard an interview with Mick Cronin, and he said, he'd asked me a month ago, the two things I would have said is we're going to have to shoot a whole lot better. And I think they have shot a little bit better, but then our defense would have to get a whole lot better for us to be able to have any kind of run. And their defense has gotten a whole lot better. But it's like you said, when you have Gonzaga, it's not just that they push the ball and score, and that's the slanted. The slanted is also a shot goes up, and there's like three guys who are crashing hard, and they're great at reading where's the ball is going. Mm-hmm. You might have numbers in front of you. I would assume that they've won every single offensive rebounding matchup in the four factors in the games that they've been a part of.
Yeah, I can't recall off the top of my head, but
and then also underrated, because we talk mostly about their offense, is turnovers. That game was in the first 2 minutes of the game the other night because of how many times they turned the ball up. They turned the opponent over, and we've already showed. I think it's still undefeated after last conversation, right? You were in goal and turnover, and you're still undefeated.
Yeah, and I think they've got a gear they can go to defensively that they don't use all the time, and I'd say the same about Baylor as well. So I guess we're revealing our picks. I've got Gonzaga versus Baylor. You?
Yes, I would have to go with those two.
Yeah, and that's a game. That's the game we've wanted to see all year long. They've been pretty much heads and above the crowd all year, and the basketball gods look like they might give it to us and on the biggest stage. So I'm looking forward to that if it plays out that way. But if it doesn't, hey, that'll be an interesting story too, because that'd mean some underdog played out of their mind and pulled off a big win.
Yeah. And if it hadn't been for COVID, ironically, this would be potentially part 2 of the.
Yeah, true.
So,
true.
You'll have more intrigue because you didn't get to see that the first time, but it will be probably just as exciting. So those are our 2 picks. Any last words on that? I mean, it's been a great tournament. I've really enjoyed. I don't know that best ever. I heard somebody say that the other day. But I think we're just excited that there is an NCAA.
Yeah.
We forget, right?
Yeah, we've got a little recency bias there maybe. But I'd say to tie it all together, UCLA, that story kind of ties together our 2 topics today where Mick Cronin, was a highly successful coach at Cincinnati, had consistently 25, 30 wins. And we talked about job change, and he's new to UCLA. He stepped out of a situation that he had basically the closest thing you can have to tenure as a coach was highly successful and went into one of these pressure jobs, and people were like, wait, why would you go to UCLA? You're such a pressure cooker. Well, 2 years later, he's in the Final Four, and Cincinnati, where he could have stayed and won, he might have never got there. So, that kind of ties the 2 topics together. Like, he's there and he's there because he bet on himself that he could stand up to that type of pressure job, and he's got it pointed in the right direction that will help that program.
Yeah. Really cool stories for all 4 of the guys. It'll be a neat story for anybody, whoever wins the national championship there.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate all those who watched. If by chance you missed any part of the show, you can go back and watch these in their entirety on the Radius Athletics YouTube page. You can also listen to the audio version. Just search a Quick Timeout podcast, and you'll find those there listed under the Hoops Forum tag. Appreciate each one of you. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll be sure to talk to you again next week on Hoops Forum.